Chapter 2. The Price of the Path. The stark economy of the Empire became Erlen's new teacher. 3 cycles after Cradle 12, his first pay deposit of 750 credits was immediately gutted by automated deductions. The recruit sustenance fee, the armor maintenance levy, the weapon lease, it all vanished, leaving a pitiful 100 credit balance blinking on his datapad. The message was clear. The Empire kept you alive, but ambition was a luxury you paid for yourself. He stood before the armory terminal, its cold blue light washing over his face. The costs were staggering. A basic kinetic shield generator, 25,000 credits. A reliable blaster pistol, not the clunky lease-to-own rifle he carried, 8,000. And then he saw the category that made his breath catch, psionic focus aids. Resonance crystal, grade D, 5,000 crossing. Meditative neural inducer, basic, 12,000 crossing. Mystic core training holos, level 1, 22,000 crossing. The Empire recognized psionic power, valued it highly, and had a price tag for every step to cultivate it. The path existed, but it was gated behind a wall of credits he couldn't hope to scale. He was trapped in a predatory loop. He needed better gear and training to survive and earn more, but he needed credits to get the training and gear. Rourke found him staring blankly at the terminal. The veteran followed his gaze to the focus aids and let out a low whistle. Thinking of going mystic, kid? That's a deep credit dive. And without a natural high CTT reading, they'll say you're wasting your time. It's the only reading I have that isn't. Pathetic, Erlen replied, the bitterness raw. Maybe, Rourke shrugged, taking a sip from his whiskey flask. But the Empire sells shovels to miners. It doesn't teach you how to find the load. Real mystic power. The kind that moves starships or cracks continents. That's not in a holotape. It's a lifetime of meditation, discipline, and a gift most of us don't have. Your flicker might just be static. Raise your threat level. The mantra now had a desperate, financial heartbeat. He needed a number, and psionic threat was the only door he could see a key for. That night, in the hollow silence of an auxiliary storage bay, Erlen began. Physical training was straightforward agony, circuits under increased gravity, building the kinetic thermal foundation his scanner understood. It was a grind of muscle and will for fractional gains. The other practice was a voyage into the unknown. He sat on the cold deck, cross-legged, trying to emulate the fragments of lore he'd heard. The mystics of Glorfia spoke of energy as a vast, silent ocean. Most beings floated on the surface. Through meditation, a mystic learned to dive. He closed his eyes, seeking the internal spark Crix's scanner had called a pulse. He breathed, trying to quiet the hammer of his heart, the memory of blaster fire, the oppressive weight of his credit balance. Nothing. Just the dark behind his eyelids and the ship's hum. He was a farmer's son trying to grasp space magic with nothing but desperation as a guide. He pushed, he strained, he willed something to happen. A headache blossomed behind his eyes. Frustration, thick and hot, rose in his throat. This was futile. Voris was right. Then, he stopped trying to force it. Exhausted, he simply remembered home. Not the ambition to leave it, but the quiet of it. The feeling of damp soil giving way underfoot, the specific green scent of the dusk damp air, the deep, contented sigh of the land itself as the sun set. It was a feeling of connection, not conquest. And there, in the cradle of that memory, he felt it. A warmth. Not in his muscles, but deeper, in the quiet center of his being. It was small, a single ember compared to the inferno of a Praetorian, but it was his. It didn't spark or crackle. It glowed with a steady, patient light. As he held the feeling, focusing not on grabbing it but on simply observing its presence, the warmth slowly spread, a gentle wave that soothed his headache and the ache in his limbs. In his mind's eye, he saw a faint, ethereal cyan light limning his own hands. This was it. Not static. Not a dud. This was the foundation. The first, fragile connection to the ocean of energy. It wasn't weaponizable yet. It wouldn't move a pebble, let alone register on a T-scanner. But it was real. It was the first step on the mystic's path. A path of inward focus, patience, and depth. The absolute antithesis of the Empire's loud, violent, outward projection of power. Playing in the dark, drudge? The voice shattered his focus. The warmth vanished, snuffed out like a candle. Voris leaned in the doorway, a silhouette of armored contempt. Supplemental training, sir, Erlen said, climbing to his feet, feeling abruptly foolish. I see no supplemental gear. I see no results. Voris stepped closer, his scanner gauntlet passively humming. Your TTL is unchanged. Your CTT is a flatline. This isn't training. It's napping. He looked around the empty bay with disgust. The Empire pays for results. It sells the tools for results. What you're doing earns nothing. Our next deployment is a mineral extraction on a high radiation rock. Survival bonus is 500 credits. That is training. That earns you the right to better gear. He turned to leave, delivering his final blow over his shoulder. Your weapon lease renews in 2 cycles. No credits, no weapon. You'll clear tunnels with a vibro pick. Focus on the power that pays, agri stock. Alone again, Erlen stared at his hands, where the phantom glow had been. The conflict was now perfectly, painfully clear. The Empire's path was transactional and external. Earn credits, buy stronger weapons, increase your measurable threat through violence and acquisition. It was a straight, brutal line. His path, the mystic's path, was internal and slow. Meditate, understand, connect, grow in energy from within through discipline and peace. It was a deepening spiral. One required him to become a more efficient predator for the machine. The other was incomprehensible to the machine, and offered no short-term survival value. Yet, it felt more true to the core of who he was, a creator, not a consumer. A nurturer, not a destroyer. He had 150 credits, a body pushed to its limit, and the first fragile ember of a true, deep power glowing in his soul. A power the scanners couldn't yet see and the Empire couldn't price. To survive the next day, he would have to play by the Empire's ruthless rules. But to ever be free of them, he would have to nurture his secret flame in the darkness, and learn the real, unvalued magic of becoming strong. The mineral world, designated X-77, was a tomb of jagged rock and silent, lethal energy. From orbit, it was a dull gray sphere, veined with the faint, sickly green of radioactive isotopes. There was no atmosphere to speak of, no life to catalog. Its only value was buried in its bones. Hyperdense lithium cores, crucial for Imperial shield technology. The Prophet's hammer didn't land so much as cling to the surface in a shuddering, teeth-rattling embrace of magnetic clamps. The squad, sealed in heavy, lead-weave environmental suits, disembarked into a landscape of eternal, star-strewn twilight. The only sounds were their own rasping breath in their helmets and the constant, ominous crackle of the radiation counters. Listen up, Voris's voice was a flat line in their comms. Radiation levels are Class 7. Your suits will hold for 12 standard hours. After that, the shielding decays. We have 10. The extraction point is 3 clicks down that gorge. Road surveys indicate seismic instability and pockets of gamma emitters. Move fast, stay sharp. The gorge was a wound in the planet's crust, a canyon of shattered black basalt. They moved in a tight, silent file. Grun's cannon was slung, useless against geology. Tavik deployed small sensor drones that skittered ahead like mechanical insects. Crix's scanner was a constant, low chime, mapping radiation and mineral density. Erlen felt smothered. The suit was heavy, the viewport limited. But it was more than that. Where Cradle 12 had been a symphony of life, X-77 was a deafening silence, punctuated by the sharp, discordant shrieks of radioactive decay. It was anti-life, and his newly sensed internal energy, that quiet cyan ember, recoiled from it. A deep, instinctive nausea, unrelated to the suit's recycled air, settled in his gut. 2 hours in, they found the first corpse. Not a Cradle folk fighter, but an earlier Imperial surveyor in a breached environment suit, curled in a fissure. The suit's insignia was faded, the visor frosted from within. No one spoke. They just stepped over it. Erlen's scanner gave a passive readout, localized gamma spike. Hazard. This was the survival bonus. You were paid extra to walk through a silent, invisible fire. Contact. Tvek's clicking voice announced. Not biological. Structural. The survey shaft has collapsed. The primary lithium vein is on the other side, Voris swore. Crix, scan for stability. Grun, can we blast it? Unadvised, Crix replied, her voice tight. The surrounding rock is fracturing. A blast could bring the entire canyon wall down on us. Readings suggest a narrow, unstable bypass to the left. It's pulsing with radiation. A direct emitter pocket. We go through, Voris decided instantly. Single file. Drudge, you're on point. Your suit's the cheapest. Scan for the safest path. Erlen's blood went cold. Point. In an unstable, radioactive tunnel. He was being used as a canary in a coal mine. This was the vibropic duty Voris had promised. Sir, my scanner is for biological and botanical. Now, Drudge. There was no arguing. Erlen moved to the front of the line, facing the jagged, dark maw of the bypass. His standard scanner showed only chaotic rock density and a blur of radiation warnings. It was useless. He switched to his cataloger's secondary setting, the one tuned for subtle energy signatures. On Cradle 12, it found the harmonic pulse of silver thread. Here, it screamed with violent, disordered energy. He took a step into the darkness, his helmet lamps cutting feeble cones through the dust. Each footfall sent tiny avalanches of pebbles skittering into the deep. The radiation counter's crackle became a frantic, continuous hiss. Panic threatened to close his throat. He couldn't see the path. He was blind. Then, he remembered the ember. The quiet, internal sense. On a dead world, what was there to sense? Not life, he realized. But energy. Flow. Disruption. He stopped, forcing his breathing to slow. He closed his eyes behind the visor, ignoring Voris's impatient grunt in his ear. He let go of the fear, of the crushing weight of the rock. He focused inward, on that small, steady warmth. Instead of pulling from it, he let it listen. He expanded his awareness outward, not with his eyes, but with the nascent mystic sense. The violent shrieks of radiation became a grotesque, blinding static. But beneath it, he could feel the stress in the rock. A deep, grinding ache of tectonic pressure to his right. A brittle, crumbling hollowness ahead and slightly left. And there, a faint, almost imperceptible thread of, not stability, but less violent chaos. A path where the deadly energy swirled instead of spiking. It wasn't a map. It was a feeling. A gut instinct written in the language of energy itself. This way, Erlen said, his voice surprisingly calm. He moved left, away from the visible wider path, toward a narrow, uninviting crevice. That's a crack, not a tunnel, Voris snapped. The wider path is under sheer pressure. It will collapse. This one, the energy is less dense. He didn't have better words for it. He heard Crix's scanner hum. He's not wrong. My structural analysis is inconclusive, but the gamma readings are 20% lower on his projected route. There was a long silence. Lead on, Voris finally growled, suspicion thick in his tone. For 20 agonizing minutes, Erlen navigated by feel. He moved like a man walking a tightrope in the dark, guided by a sixth sense he didn't fully understand. He avoided a section that felt like a screaming mouth, which Crix's sensors later confirmed was a direct vent of pure rad gas. He guided them over a bridge of rock that sang with a tense, fragile harmony, which held their weight. He wasn't raising his threat level. He was using a power that had no place on a T-scanner's readout: sensitivity. They emerged into a larger cavern, the target lithium vein glittering dully in their lamps. The squad was silent, already moving to plant extraction charges. But Erlen stood still, trembling inside his suit. He had saved them. Not with a weapon, but with a whisper. Voris clomped over to him. He didn't offer praise. He studied Erlen's suit, then the dark crevice they'd emerged from. A lucky guess, Drudge. Or maybe your flicker is good for something besides napping after all. His tone was calculating, not impressed. But don't get ideas. Luck isn't a quantifiable asset. It runs out. As the demolition charges were set, Erlen leaned against the cold cavern wall. The 500 credit survival bonus would clear his weapon lease. It would keep him in the game. But he had discovered something far more valuable. In the Empire's most dead and valuable place, he had used a power of perception and connection to survive. It was a farmer's skill, refined by a mystic's awareness. It was the antithesis of everything the Empire valued, and it had just proven more immediately useful than Grun's cannon. The path ahead was splitting. One road was paved with credits, bought weapons, and measurable, violent threat. The other was a hidden trail, lit by an inner ember, demanding patience and offering a strength no scanner could price. He was stranded at the fork. And the choice, he knew, would define far more than his rank. It would define what kind of power, and what kind of being, he would ultimately become. The 500 credit survival bonus was a lifeline. After the weapon lease renewal, Erlen stared at his updated balance, 355 credits. It wasn't wealth, but it was agency. He knew exactly how to spend it. In the bowels of the ship, in a sector that reeked of stale sweat, recycled blood, and cheap energy weapon scorch marks, was the live training pit. It was an unregulated, grim space where drudges and low-level enforcers went to blow off steam, gamble, and occasionally, improve. Erlen approached the plexisteel viewing window overlooking a scarred, octagonal cell. On a grimy terminal, he selected his transaction. Subject: Minnow's combat variant, threat level, 360 to 400 session fee. 120 credits, no time limit. Subject disposal included. Weapons policy, participant discretion. Armor permitted. He transferred the credits. He wouldn't use his blaster. He had paid for this creature. He would meet its measured threat with his own hands, his own strength. This was about raising his physical power, the kinetic thermal threat the scanner understood. He stripped off his bulky torso armor, standing only in his reinforced leggings and boots. His cyan skin looked alien under the pit's harsh white lumo strips. As he stepped through the heavy hatch into the cell, a low hum announced the atmospheric seal. The opposite hatch slid open. The minnows scuttled in. It was all jagged angles and oily, blue-black chitin, standing on two powerful hind legs. Its four upper limbs ended in wickedly serrated blades. It chittered, faceted eyes locking onto him. The wall scanner flickered, assigning it a starting value, TL 371. Erlen settled into a basic stance he'd learned from the warrior clan, knees bent, hands up, center of gravity low. He felt absurdly underarmed. The fight began not with a roar, but with a terrifying, skittering charge. Erlen dodged the first slashing limb, feeling the wind of its passage. He countered with a punch to its side. It felt like hitting solid rock. Pain jolted up his arm. The minnows barely flinched, twisting with insectoid speed to backhand him with a bladed arm. Erlen caught the blow on his forearm guard. The impact was immense, sending him stumbling back, his arm numb to the elbow. He was outclassed in strength, speed, and durability. He heard laughter. Looking up, he saw faces pressed to the viewing window above. A handful of off-duty Iron Enforcers and junior lieutenants had gathered, drawn by the spectacle of a Glorfian facing a Minnows bare-handed. 200 credits says the bug dismantles him in under a minute, one lieutenant jeered. I'll take that. The Cyan one looks slippery, another laughed. 50 on the Minnows. Look at him, he hits like he's patting soil. The bets flew, a cacophony of contempt. Erlen was a curiosity, a joke. His face burned with humiliation that was hotter than the pain in his arm. Then, a voice cut through, calm and clear. 100 credits on the Glorfian. Silence fell at the window. Erlen risked a glance. The bettor was Lieutenant Corvus, the tactical officer attached to their battalion, a sharp-featured man known for his eerie calm and unreadable T-scanner reports. He met Erlen's gaze for a fraction of a second, gave an almost imperceptible nod, then looked away. The bet was an anchor. It wasn't kindness, it was a calculated assessment. It said, I see something you don't. It flipped a switch in Erlen. The humiliation crystallized into cold, focused rage. He wasn't just fighting for training. He was fighting for the one person who hadn't written him off as a joke. The Minnows lunged again. This time, Erlen didn't just dodge. He flowed with the motion, using its momentum, grabbing a bladed limb and leveraging his whole body weight to try and twist it. The chitin creaked. He landed a knee to its thoracic joint. It screeched, more in annoyance than pain. He was adapting, learning its rhythms. But he wasn't hurting it. He was a gnat harassing a wolf. His muscles screamed, his breath was fire in his lungs. He couldn't win this with farmers' patience or warriors' borrowed forms alone. Strength. I need raw strength. The thought was a scream in his mind. In a desperate clinch, the Minnows threw him off. Erlen slammed into the wall, the breath knocked from him. As the creature reared up for a final, plunging strike, a primal fear unlocked something. Not the gentle, listening ember of his meditation. This was a surge, a hot, bright spark of pure survival instinct from a deeper well, a well of mystic power that didn't want to listen, but to push back. He didn't have time to aim or think. As the bladed limb descended, he threw up his hand, palm out, and willed the energy out. A bolt of raw, unfocused cyan energy, more a violent discharge than a beam, erupted from his palm. It wasn't clean or controlled. It was a scream made light. It struck the Minnows in the center of its mass. There was no explosion, but a concussive thump of displaced air. The creature was hurled backwards, its chitin cracking audibly. It hit the far wall and slid down, smoking, its limbs twitching spasmodically before falling still. Dead silence in the pit. The wall scanner flickered wildly, then resolved. Minnows TL 000. Participant TL, peak combat output 384. 384. A 33-point spike. His body thrummed with exhaustion and strange, electric aftershocks. He stared at his smoking palm, stunned. He'd done it. He'd tapped into it. Not with control, but with desperate, lethal will. The hatch hissed open. The crowd above was murmuring, now arguing over credits. Lieutenant Corvus collected his winnings with a small, satisfied smile. A deck sergeant in a stained apron came in, dragging an anti-grav sled. Huh. Clean kill. Nasty burn. Psionic discharge. He grunted, looking at Erlen's hand. Lucky shot. Don't get used to it. It'll fry your nervous system if you don't know what you're doing. He loaded the Minnow's carcass. Your winnings are transferred. Now clear out, you're holding up the next bout. Back in the corridor, leaning against the cold wall, Erlen checked his account. Starting balance. 355 crossing. Training fee. -120 crossing. Winnings from bet. +250 crossing. Current balance. 485 crossing. He had more credits than he'd started with. He had a higher threat level. And he had, for one blinding moment, touched the destructive power the Empire valued. But as the adrenaline faded, his hand began to tremble violently. A sharp, neuralgic pain spiked behind his eyes. The sergeant's warning echoed, "It'll fry your nervous system." He had gained a number by tapping into a power he couldn't control, in a system that only respected the result. He had also taken a step onto a path far more dangerous than any minnow's, a path where his own latent energy could break him as easily as it broke his enemies. The climb was possible, but the cost of each step was becoming terrifyingly clear.